So now let's go through and take a look at the steps that you would go through during this phase. Obviously, the first thing you're going to want to do is get proper authorization, and that's going to be from whoever's in charge. It may or may not include system administrators. A lot of times, companies want to know how their sysadmins are actually performing. After we go through that process, we then want to make sure that we define the scope. Now, defining the scope of the pen test is a prerequisite. Now, going through this stage helps to set you up as far as what is going to be tested. What are your ranges of systems? What are your limitations? Once you've defined the scope, you should plan and gather information around that scope using your reconnaissance tools.
Where would I start, Dale?
Well, that's easy. We're going to start with search engines. We're going to go Google, Bing, Yahoo, Ask, Dogpile, whichever one you want to use to look at what information is currently being exposed. I might actually check some other sites as well, maybe social networking sites. Start off with the Facebook page or Twitter account for the company itself and see who's a friend of that company, because that's typically going to be the employees, and see if I can backtrack from there. After I'm done looking through the search engines, I'm then going to try to see if I can Google hack them. And I can either do that if I know the syntax myself, or I can use some additional tools that basically give me a GUI front end, like SiteDigger or the Google Hacking Database or MetaGoofle. If you remember from our reconnaissance course, Google hacking allows me to find resources that have been crawled by the Google search engine that companies may not know are being listed. Things like printers, cameras, which could give me an insight of IP addresses that are exposed, as well as what the device does. My next step after the Google hack is, again, going after those social networks: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest. People have this tendency at the social networking level to let their guards down. It's very easy for me to not only just see what people are talking about, but actually start up conversations with users or the employees. Hey, sounds like you got a great company. I'm thinking about joining the IT team. What type of systems do you guys use there? And of course, my favorite also is the help wanted pages. My next step would then be to go and footprint the websites. And I'm going to do that with a couple of different tools, either Black Widow, Website Copier, or HTTrack. What I'm going to do with these is download the entire website so that I can look at it offline and look at the code. You have to remember, everything that's presented to me in a web interface are simply files that are downloaded to my system. So why not download an exact copy of that website, directory structure and all, so I can take a look at what they're doing on the back end, especially if they're making calls from the front end to the back end. I'll then go through and do some email footprinting. Again, I've got some neat tools that'll do that for me, using a simple NS lookup command interface to find out the DNS names and IP addresses of their MX servers. I'll also use things like Email Tracker Pro, Email Lookup, and Polite Mail. Again, in this course, we're not giving you detailed information on how to utilize these tools. We've already done that. We're just putting this stuff inside of a step-by-step process for the pen test. Some of the information that I can get off of emails would include things like the encryption that they're using, as well as other services they could be using along with their email environment. Or are they hosting the email servers themselves, or are they hosting them from a provider? Then I'm going to go through and do some competitive intelligence. We call it competitive intelligence because that's what most people use these services for. Legitimate businesses will go through and find out what their competitors are trying to do. But again, attackers can use these same resources to find out what the people are doing. Services like Hoover. I understand they really suck. Just kidding. That was my vacuum joke of the day. Business Wire and Linux, and LexisNexis. Now, most of these are going to be paid services, but depending on the size of my target, it could be worthwhile. And before you pay for these types of services, you would definitely want to check to make sure it's something that the client or your company is willing to reimburse you for. It's also a great way for them to discover what their competitors might be seeing. Next up in my steps is to do a Who is Recon, so I can find out actually who owns your IP address range or your domain. I'm going to use a couple of different tools to accomplish that, like Smart Whois, Domain Dossier, as well as Superscanner. Sometimes these tools will also do things like some basic enumeration based off of like DNS, which would be my next step, is to do some DNS reconning. And again, I can use tools like DNS Stuff, Sam Spade, and the good old NS Lookup tool. That NS Lookup command prompt is actually quite powerful. Now, one of the reasons why I want to do a DNS recon is because I'm actually able to determine key host systems in the network that I could then use to perform social engineering attacks, or I could actually use during a DNS poisoning attack. My next step would be then to perform a network recon. Now, these types of tools, such as Path Analyzer, which shows us the path that a packet takes, as well as Visual Route and Network Pinger, allow me to find out other information about the target network, which helps me to draw a better diagram of what I'm dealing with. And then finally, I'm going to try to attempt some type of social engineering attack or test. That includes something like shoulder surfing, see if I can gather information just by watching what people are doing, dumpster diving, as well as eavesdropping. This sometimes allows me to gather information such as the organization's security products that they're using, operating systems, software versions, network layout, IP addresses, names of servers, and who are the bigwigs. And then finally, I'm going to want to go through and make sure that I obviously document everything that I find. I'm going to use this document and all the information that I've collected to truly study, understand, and analyze the security posture of my target. I think a lot of people would actually be amazed at the information that you can extrapolate from the information that you've pulled off the network using this technique. And this is why it's so important to spend as much time as possible here, is because you're actually creating a map of everything else you're about to do.